Hey guys, welcome back to Bear Mountain Builds. I'm Zach. And today we're building ourselves a rolling tool cabinet. Now this cabinet's built on a beefy 2x4 frame that is 24 inches deep and 48 inches wide. This build is perfect for you guys with a smaller shop because this build is making use of every single cubic inch of storage it has to offer. On one end we have my favorite clamps stored and ready to go whenever you need them. On the other end we have all my yellow drills and drivers ready to go. And honestly, it just looks good. Along with that, this build offers 12 total drawers, 10 of which that are 3-inch drawers, perfect for your low profile tools, like your wrenches, all of your hardware, and a bunch of pliers. Additionally, we have 2 deep drawers on the bottom, perfect for your larger tools, like your circular saw or your planers. For this build, it's very cost effective. We're not spending a fortune on sliders. Instead, we're using super simple and easy sliderless drawers that are just using low friction tape, and they work really well. Honestly, if you're going to buy this at a store, you're going to be spending 3, if not 4 times as much as the cost it takes to build this. But if you're watching this video, you're probably a woodworker, and do you want to say, hey, look what I just bought? Or do you want to say, hey, look what I just built? I make it as easy as possible. I offer detailed plans that include a material list, cut plans, and full assembly instructions. So if you're interested in those, I'll have those linked down below in the video description. And with that, hit the subscribe button, and let's get started with the build. Just like that, we've got all of our 2x4 frame pieces cut out, ready to go. And that's pocket holes, baby. So what we're going to be using them for is we're going to be mounting our 2 halves of our frame together with our cross pieces with pocket holes on the ends of our cross piece. And we're going to be running some pocket holes along the length of all of our boards. That way we can mount our top and bottom platforms directly to the frame. All right, we've got all of our pocket holes drilled out, so it's time to start putting this frame together. So real quick how it's all gonna work. This frame functions off lap joints. I love them because they're super strong and they're really easy. You have a piece of wood that's your leg, another piece of wood that goes across the top and sits on it. All your load transfers through that wood into the floor. Super easy, so with that we're gonna put our legs together first. Putting these legs together is really easy. We have our long leg and then we have our shorter leg that's gonna separate our top stretcher from the bottom stretcher. All we're gonna do is throw some glue on our shorter piece, put this on top, get it close to center, and then we got our other cross pieces that we're not using right now that we're going to use just to space it so that smaller board is centered along our big board. And then once it's glued, we can screw it in place. I'm putting these screws through the long board because that's going to be the inside of the table. That way we're not going to see any screw heads, so it just looks a little bit more finished. Sometimes these boards can get a little bowy, and you gotta just clamp it down to the table so these legs keep nice and tight. All right, so we got both halves of our frame all done. So now we're gonna get our cross pieces attached in the 4 corners, and then we'll put the other half right on top of those. Again, we're being mindful of where our pocket holes are because we wanna make sure these are in the right orientation so it goes up into our platforms and not down into nothing. I like to use clamps to kind of hold these cross pieces in place while I'm screwing them in the pocket screws, because when you got glue on there, they can get a little squirrely if you're just trying to hold it by hand. All right, now we can put our last frame piece on here. And remember, pocket screw orientation. Frame's all done. All right, our frame is all done, and now since we got it on the floor, it's time to perform the mandatory Bare Mountain Builds rock solidness test. This frame is officially Bare Mountain Builds rock solid certified. Next up, we're gonna go ahead and mount some caster wheels. As always, I'm using 4-inch caster wheels. They're a little bit more expensive than 2 inches, but they roll over everything on the floor. These are the best ones I've ever found, and I'll have a link to them in the video description if you wanna check them out. Remember, always hand tighten your lag screws so you don't strip them out. All right, build's going really fast, so we're moving on to our top and bottom platforms. We've got a sheet of 3/4 inch laid out for us. We're gonna strip this down the middle, cut it in half again, and then finish up our workbench. Now for our bottom platform, we're actually going to need to notch out our corners to fit around the legs. How I like to do that is I just kind of set it on top, match up my corners, and then trace out my leg. Then once I'm done with that, I can just notch out these corners with a jigsaw. We haven't fully squared up our frame yet, so I do adjust it to every single corner, so that way we have a perfect fit once we actually square the frame. All right, we've got our bottom and our top platforms ready to go and be mounted on here. When we mount those platforms on here, it's going to lock our frame in place. So this is the time where we actually want to check and make sure our frame is square. In this case, this dimension is just a hair longer by about 1/8 of an inch or so than our dimension going this way. Let me show you the secret to actually fixing an out of square frame is an inexpensive ratchet strap. Since this is our longer dimension, we're just gonna use our ratchet strap to force this frame back into square. So I put this up close to the joints that we want to affect, and then I'm just gonna keep tightening it and measuring until our diagonals are the same length. 53.5 plus 1/8. 53.5 plus 1/8, that's about close enough. Just like that, our frame is back in square, so now we can actually go ahead and we're gonna mount our top platform on here, and that's gonna hold this frame perfectly square. Fits like a glove. 1.25-inch pocket screws. Our workbench is done, looking super good. Now we're moving on to the meat and potatoes of this build, and that's our storage system. It's gonna be pretty much basic cabinetry from here. So what we gotta do is we're gonna add a wall here, and then a center wall that's gonna split up our 2 drawer systems. We're gonna go cut those out of some 3/4 inch plywood. We've got our 2 panels cut out. Now these are going to be the sides of our cabinet. Now how we're going to mount these in is we're just going to throw some glue onto our legs, and then we're just going to brad nail these in place. But the big thing to note is we want our drawer front faces to be inset to our frame. So I'm going to be using my Bare Mountain Builds 1/2-inch spacers. We're just going to run these along the front side of our cabinet just to make sure that our wall is inset by that 1/2 inch. So once we got our glue up, we can start to put our panel into place. And now this is going to be the front side of our cabinet, so we just need to make sure that it's back set by 1/2 inch, and we're going to use our 1/2-inch spacers to ensure that. I'm just going to start at the bottom. That's 1/2 inch right there. Then we're just going to use a brad nailer, lock that corner in place. Then we're going to go up to the top and do the same thing. So we just pin in the bottom, and then we can just go ahead and pin in our top piece as well. Then we just go ahead and lock everything in from here. So with that, we've got our two sidewalls in. Now we need to put in our center panel, which is going to be this, but we do need to add our notches in our top corners so they can fit around our frame. We've got our two sidewalls in, so now it's time to install our center divider. It's always good to do a dry fit first, which I've already done. So let's get started. I've traced out where that divider is going to be. So I'm going to run a glue bead right where it will be sitting. And then I have my spacers, and that's going to just make sure that our center divider is centered and parallel to this wall. So I'll put those in place first. Spacers are always way better than measuring because you know they're perfect. With our spacers in place, we're just going to throw some glue down into the notches on our center divider because these are going to fit up into our frame. And then since we have a bead already down on the bottom, we're going to start the base of our divider close to that bead so it can just rotate up and onto it. And then we'll fit and slide our divider up into place. And then I have a couple more spacers to make sure that our top is also parallel to our wall. And we've got a nice snug fit, which is exactly what we're looking for. Just to make things a little easier, I'll clamp these upper spacers into place. Now that we got this roughed into place and we know that we're good to go for our 1/2-inch spacers on top, we're just going to send a couple toenails for brad nails in through the bottom to hold it in place. Now for up top, we're going to be pinning the center divider in place with these two blocks. So they're going to be going in just like this, but they're going to be pinned into our frame, and that's going to just sandwich this center divider in place. Since we got these spacers in here, they're really great because you can actually push against them and make sure you're nice and tight up in there. Since we got our blocks in there, we can go ahead and remove these top spacers so we can get our other block in on the other side. So I've added a line to make things easy for myself. Done. With that, we've got our 3 walls in our workbench, and honestly, it's really starting to look like a cabinet now, so we're moving on to building out our drawer slot sliders. We've got our 3/4 inch piece of plywood all cut out. These are going to be our drawer slots. Now for these drawers, I want to have stops on them so they can't pull all the way out because it's going to be the worst if you pull the drawer all the way out and all of your tools just tumble out of it. So to make some stops, we're using some 1/2-inch plywood. Now here at Bear Mountain Builds, I think efficiency and laziness are one and the same. So to make sure we don't have to take quite as many cuts and have to put these little stops in one by one, we have our whole strip of 1/2-inch plywood. We're just going to glue and brad nail it onto the end, and then we'll strip this thing out. Before we get our sliders mounted into our cabinet, a word about friction. You're going to want to do something to these to reduce the friction because our drawers are going to be sliding along these and it'll just make them slide a lot easier. What you can do is just sand the edge and then your drawers will slide along it. You could even add a little wax on there, but my favorite option is low friction tape. This stuff works wonders. The drawers slide on it really well, and above all else, I don't have to sand anything. All right, it's finally time to install our sliders. Now, as you can tell, I've turned the whole cabinet onto its side. That way we've got gravity pushing our sliders into our wall. Just makes it a little bit easier to install. When we're actually installing these, it's gonna be like Legos. It's super easy. All we're gonna do is put our first slider in at the base, get it positioned, we'll glue and brad nail that in place, and then as we're using our 1/2 inch spacers again, this will set the slot that our drawers are going to be sliding in and out of. So you can just stack that on top of our lowest slider. Then we can go ahead and get our next slider in there, mount that in place, move our spacers to the next one, and we'll just build our way all the way to the top of the cabinet. It honestly is really easy. With that, let's get our sliders installed. Now, for you guys that are thinking, the bottom of my drawers are 1/2 inch plywood and we're gonna use a 1/2 inch spacer, won't that bind up? Good thinking, but no. When the store says it's 1/2 inch plywood, it's not actually quite 1/2 inch, you're a little bit under 1/2 inch. So it'll have a nice snug fit, but we're not gonna get any binding. If you get any sort of glue squeeze while you're installing these sliders, you're going to want to clean that up because we're installing everything really tight and it will get in the way. And we're done. All right, we've got all of our sliders in place. Everything's got our low friction tape, so these are ready for drawers. Now, as you guys saw, this whole process goes really fast with those 1/2 inch spacers. It's just like putting Legos together. So now that our whole cabinet is ready to go, it's time to go build some drawers. We've got all of our drawer bottoms cut out. Now, before we go ahead and build the rest of the drawer, it's good practice to test fit these like I am doing right now. There's nothing worse than building your whole drawer, going to put it in, and it doesn't fit. Before you assemble these drawers, another good practice is to sand both the top and bottom surfaces of these drawers. That way, they'll just slide in here, all the better. With these drawer bottoms, we have pretty tight tolerances, but with my plans, it makes the whole process really easy because I have all the dimensions in here, along with several helpful notes to kind of help size these bottom platforms for you. Now that we've done our test fit and we know that all of our drawer bottoms are fitting, we can go ahead and build out the rest of our drawer. We're moving on to our drawers, so I'm putting my sides together. Now I just put these together with glue and brad nails, and I'm gonna do these first, and then I'll mount them onto my drawer bottoms. There's several ways you can put these sides together. First, what I've done in the past is I have these 90-degree corner clamps. I have them mounted to my assembly table in the form of a jig, where all I have to do is load drawer side in, and then I can go ahead and brad nail this thing together. Then you just work your way around the drawer until your drawer is done. Works pretty doggone well, but not everybody has an assembly table. So I've come up with a better idea, which is these 90-degree corner clamps that fit onto my trigger clamp, where all you have to do is feed your boards into it, and then you can clamp it down. They work really well. You can have 4 set up all the way around your drawer, and you can just move your drawer around, brad nail it, and you're good to go. These things are really fast, and if you're interested in these and you want to support the channel, I'll have them linked down below in the video description so you can check them out. Now, let's get our drawers put together. When you're using a brad nail, make sure your fingers aren't anywhere near the end of that nailer when you're clicking the trigger, because sometimes they shoot all over the place, and I've had a couple close calls before. So with that, we've got one drawer side all put together. We've got 11 more drawers to go. So mounting these drawer sides to our bottoms is pretty doggone straightforward. Only thing we gotta consider is we gotta make sure that these sides are centered on our main platform. Now, how we're doing that is I've already cut 2 jigs. Now these are gonna be just jigs where I can mark a line that's gonna find the center line on both my bottom and on my drawer side. So first up, we're gonna mark the center line on our bottoms, just on the end grain. And we'll do that on both sides. Whoops. Oh, wait. And it's good practice just to make sure you're using the same side every single time. With our center lines found on our bottom, we're going to do the same thing on our drawer sides. All right, now that we've got our center lines found on both of our parts, what we need to do is we need to make sure that when we're gluing this and brad nailing in place, we know exactly where our sides are, because we're going to do it all upside down. We won't be able to see exactly where our sides are going to be. So what we're going to do is we're just laying this on here. We're going to match our lines up together, and then we're just going to trace out the walls on this bottom piece, and that's just going to be a good guide for us for where we're going to put our brad nails. Now that this is centered, we can go ahead and mark the inside and the outside of these walls, and that just makes a little drawn out track for where our brad nails can go. Now that we've got our walls drawn out on the bottom side of our bottom, we can just go ahead, throw some glue down on our sides, lay it in place and center it up again, and then we can just throw all of our brad nails in through that track. Once we got both of our center lines lined up on each piece, then I like to put one brad nail in at each center line, and then you can just go ahead and make your way all the way around. There we go. So sometimes your walls might get a little bowed, which it's not really a big deal. You can just pull it off the side and pull it out and line everything up, or if it's bowed out, you can just push it in, and then the brad nails are just going to hold everything in place while the glue sets it up. Just like that, one drawer down, 11 more to go. All right, we've got all of our drawers put together. Now, as these drawers sit right now, It's a busy day, it's hectic, and you're one overzealous pull away from dumping all of your hardware all over the floor and really ruining your day. So before we get these installed, we're gonna put in some drawer stops. These stops are super simple. They're just a little piece of 1/2-inch plywood. And we're using my spacers again to position these. Now, I should have said this earlier, but you definitely don't need my spacers to put together this entire build. For years, I would just cut out pieces of plywood to make impromptu spacers for all of my builds. But the reason I invented these spacers was because I was sick of cutting out pieces of plywood to make spacers for many, many years. So that's why I came up with these. But this positions it super well. We're just gonna glue and brad nail them in place, and this drawer is good to go. Since these bigger drawers are going to be probably taking some more weight than our thin drawers because there's more volume here and we're going to put some heavier items in, we're going to be moving our stoppers forward by another 2 inches. That way we can just prevent any sort of binding that will come with that extra weight. Alrighty, we've got all of our drawers in here, looking really good. All of our drawers work really well. We got stops on here now. Gotta say, as a woodworker, this gives me the fizz. So, we're moving on to getting these drawers locked into place, so we're gonna go ahead and cut out our fronts and get those mounted up, and then we're gonna put our back panel in place. I'm working on a dust collector for one of these. I'm sick of the plume of dust that comes up every single time. Alrighty, we've got all of our drawer fronts all cut out, ready to be assembled on here. So once again, we're treating woodworking like Legos because this is going to be super fast and easy. Took out these top 2 drawers so we have a little bit of better access to our drawer here. But we're starting off putting our 2 1/8-inch spacers on the bottom. Then we can put our drawer front on, and we'll just use our 1/8-inch spacer to space it over from the frame. And then we'll throw our 2 clamps on here to clamp it onto the drawer itself. Now that our front's locked onto our drawer, go ahead, pull our spacers out, and pull the drawer out so we can get a little bit better access to everything. For these bottom drawers, we're going to be using 4 7/8-inch long screws. That way they're not going to poke through or anything, but we're going to get really good engagement just to attach this front on here. So, for these big drawers, we're using 4 screws. And then once they're in, drawer front's locked in place. You can slide that back in, and then we can move up to our next drawer. For these top drawers, we're doing it just a little bit different. We're gonna just pull out the second from the top drawer and then pull the top one out. That way we can have access to get our clamps in here because the frame's in the way otherwise. With that, we got all of our drawer fronts on here, so we're gonna be moving on to doing some handles. Now for this build, I'm trying to keep everything relatively cheap, and hardware's pretty doggone expensive. So I've gone ahead and 3D printed my own handles, which I'll have an STL file available for you guys if you want to check that out. And if there's enough interest, I might even sell them. So let's get these mounted up. With that, we are so close. Just got to go put a back panel on. We've got our back panel cut out of 1/2-inch plywood here, ready to go. Now I have a bit of confession. My original design for this was going to be a 1/4 inch sheet of plywood for our back panel. That's why we're inset by 1/2 inch to our frame. I realized when I was working on my drawers that I was going to have enough leftover 1/2 inch plywood to have a back panel made out of that. So that's what I'm doing. Instead of requiring you guys to buy a whole nother sheet of 1/4 inch plywood, we're going to use what we got. So I've updated the plans so that this is going to be inset by 3/4 of an inch. That way when you put your 1/2 inch plywood in there, it will still have that inset 1/4 inch look, because I really like it. But in my case, since it's going to be flush with the frame, we're just going to match it to the drawers. So we're going to have an 1/8 inch gap all the way around, and we're going to locate it with spacers again. So with that, the build for the rolling tool cabinet is done, but we're not quite finished just yet. So this is going to become tool storage for me. I've gone ahead and 3D printed these universal pegs that have a 2-degree slant so they can push stuff towards the wall, and these clamp blocks that you can clamp onto, keep your clamps organized. These are all going to go in here. You don't need this stuff. You could just as easily use some screws and 2x4s and accomplish pretty much the same thing, but I really like 3D printing, think it's fun, and if you got a tool, you might as well use it. I went ahead and finished off my drawers too. So some of these, I put in some drawer liners so that way none of my tools are going to be sliding around in them. I also printed out some drawer inserts that are great for storing my hardware in these drawers. They fit perfectly to these drawers, and they're great if you just need to pull them out. Anything in this video that I 3D printed especially for this build, like my handles, my hangers, or these drawer inserts, I'm going to have available as STL files, so if you have a printer, you can print them out yourself. And if there's some of you guys who want these things as physical products so you don't have a printer, let me know in the comment section. I might release them as well. So with that, our rolling tool cabinet is done. Honestly, I've really loved this build. I really got to let my design sense and imagination run wild on this thing. I really like my hangers on the side. Honestly, there is not a single ounce of space in this thing that has been wasted. It is all storage, so really love this thing. And for those of you guys who did not see my modular workbench, this is the modular workbench that I did a whole video on, and this is a modular workbench, but with the drawers in here. I had a lot of you guys requesting this video to add drawers to the modular workbench, so here it is. I love this thing. Along with that, I've had a lot of requests for my expanding miter saw table or expanding table saw to also have drawers in those as well. So I'm going to be offering plans for those too, and you can find those linked down below in the video description or in the original video's description as well. With that, hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future projects. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, hit the like button for me. Helps me out a ton. I really do appreciate it. If you got any comments on the build, let me know down below. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.